Welcome back to the agency. This is Detective Chase Clay, closing the case of Outlast. That's right, the last episode we did was the end of it, and this is just a recap of what happened, what events happened in that final episode, a bit of an explanation of my thoughts going along, and then just kind of a wrap-up, closing the case, essentially. It all just comes back to that. The investigation board has been updated. We got the status of people. I'm going to explain all this in a second. The status of people. We got clearer views of what some look like. If you just look at the board right now, there's some things that may raise your mind, like, you know, some certain people that we thought were dead. And there's pictures of them right there, and some people being dead. That's all going to be explained now. So let's do the recap first. In the last episode, the final one, we was met by a variant who was sent by Father Martin to tell us to... He was saying something like, the keys to the house of God are in the theater? In the recreation hall. So we went there, to the recreation hall. It was a movie screen, like a picture theater. And after doing a bit of exploration, we found the key to be in the projector room, where the light begins. I'm not sure if that's got any thematic connotation, you know, the light beginning. Maybe Father Martin linked that with the light of God. I could be analysing it too much, but it's never harmful to start thinking. But the key was in the projector room. We picked that key up, about to escape, and we was met by the two men, or the twin. I'd call them the two men. I'm still not sure if they're actually twins, but that's what they've been known as, but I'll just call them two men for now. And so they was finding us. Luckily, we managed to get past them and unlock the door to go up to the house of God, as in the chapel. Also, point to note, sorry, rewind just a second. Before I collected the key, while I was exploring in the theater room, there was a movie on about Wernicke, Dr. Wernicke, explaining what all of this morphogenic, and well, he didn't explain all of it, but he was talking about what this morphogenic engine was, and this wall rider thing, and that will be explained just a bit more, because we get a front row seat. Pun intended. Pun not intended. To have all this explained to us, which we'll get to in just a second. But there was a guy hiding in a locker while we was exploring the theater who was like... Oh, he was saying something like, you have to seek out Wernicke. And that really confused me, because I thought he was dead. But apparently, that was not the case. So, back to the present now. We went to the house of God, the chapel area, and everyone was in their rooms, all the variants were in their rooms, praying. It was kind of calm, but also very creepy at the same time, because everyone was in their rooms, on their knees, just praying, probably because of the event that was about to happen. I traversed through all the rooms and finally got to the chapel area where, surprise, surprise, the two men were just standing there, not doing anything to me, and there were also a bunch of variants too, standing there, not doing anything to me. We witnessed in the chapel Father Martin hung up on the cross. I didn't get too good of a look whether he was nailed on the wrists and feet, but he was hung up on the cross, and not an upside down cross like we've seen some variants. Crucified, if that's the correct word, sacrificed. It wasn't like an upside down cross like that. It was like a normal, like a normal cross. And not only was he pinned up on that cross, he was talking about how Miles would share the truth. But for some reason that meant that he had to sacrifice himself. He had schizophrenic tendencies, he was an asylum patient, so logic is not the primary thing that is in the minds of these people. But he was then burned on the cross. So, strung up, or pinned up, and then burned. And he was saying to us, before he got burned, he was like, yeah, here's the key take the key, it will get you out of here. So we watched him get burned, recorded all of that. Miles made a funny note. He was like, this guy really just one-upped Jesus, didn't he? Probably because not only did he get crucified, or I don't know if crucified is the right word for it, but sacrificed, and then he got burned at the same time. So Father Martin was dead. Everyone was wailing and mourning. It was really weird what was happening. No one seemed to be paying attention to me, including the two men that for all this time were chasing me down, talking about ripping my tongue out and my kidneys and whatever. But I guess in the presence of Father Martin, everyone got a bit more docile and was focusing on what was truly happening. Maybe because they all were believing in his words, the gospel of the sand, as he liked to call it, about me needing to reveal the truth and whatnot. So that was a interesting turn of events. We grabbed the key, we was about to get out, got furiously chased by Walker, just managing to flee him last second by climbing in a vent and getting out. And I thought that would be the last time I saw him, since we were supposed to escape. But instead of the elevator, so the key was to the elevator to go down to the main area, but instead of the elevator going to the exit, it paused at the exit and then went further down. Whether someone else did that or that was Father Martin's plan all along, because he did have a plan of revealing the truth of this place to the public through us, through Miles. We went down to a subterranean, I'm gonna call it subterranean, I think that's the right word, underground, yeah, subterranean area, and it was like ice everywhere, and it was carved out ice, and there was a lab underneath Mount Massive Asylum. I was gonna say Mount Murkoff then. Mount Massive Asylum. It was I'm not gonna say pristine, but it looked very technologically advanced. I'm not saying pristine because there was blood and guts everywhere. In fact, the first place that we went to, which was the reception area, was the place that, if you recall all the way back at the start of this journey, when Miles was about to escape, he was in the security room opening the doors about to escape, and as he got injected by Father Martin then showed us on the cameras of a bunch of soldiers getting absolutely demolished by a spirit-like entity, which we didn't know at the time what it was, or like exactly what it was, but this room was that area where they all died. It was a recording of this underground lab. So we did a bit of researching, we moved around a lot, and we found a lot of documents talking about Project Walrider. There was some scientists talking about 15 failed experiments, which means 15 probably mutilated and dead corpses, trying to get this Project Walrider thing to stick, and that will be explained in a second, wherever this Project Walrider is. And we saw the exit. There was an exit. You could almost feel the warmth of the sun coming down from the massive, it was like these hangar doors. And just as we was about to loop around, lockdown initiated, sirens blaring, it was pretty panic-inducing. And none other than the Walrider started coming out the door and chasing us. We managed to run away from him. I almost thought I had nowhere to go, but as a last-minute resort, a Hail Mary if you will, another pun, I guess, kind of intended, I opened the door, because I thought the door was locked, but I thought I'd give it a go. Opened the door, and Chris Walker was on the other side of the door, so I had the Walrider behind me and Chris Walker in front of me. Grabbed Miles by the neck. I thought it may be, like, nearing towards the end. I was like, well, he's got Miles now, and all Walker wants to do is kill everyone who's been infected, you know, to contain this, his security protocols and whatnot. But the Walrider, I don't know if I want to use the word saved, but the Walrider attacked Walker. He threw him around like he was a piece of meat, like weighing 500 grams or something, throwing him on the walls, dragging him along the walls. He lifted him up into the air. Miles got a better look with the night vision. We saw the humanoid, a proper look at the humanoid figure, and you can see in the investigation board as well, kind of like humanoid skeleton-like almost, translucent-ish spectre, picked up Walker, kind of merged inside him, went through him, like choking him out, and just forced him through a grate. Like, the grate was probably about, each slit was probably that wide, and imagine a big man like Walker just pushed him in there like he was cheese, grated him. It was a lot of blood, a lot of gore, a lot of Walker's insides were left on the floor, and as we can see on the board, that was the end of Walker. Just this massive behemoth of an entity that we were so afraid of. Rightfully so, because we saw him just separate a head from a body of one of the variants, but just dead just like that. And again, Miles made another note. He was saying, you may have escaped this hell, but I hope you haven't found yourself caught in another. I'm not sure what that meant, as if maybe being killed by the Wall Rider means you get sent to a limbo or something, or maybe it was just Miles was just metaphorically saying it. I'm not exactly sure what that was, but that was the end of Walker. So then the Wall Rider disappeared, and we was venturing forth along this underground laboratory when we meet, as again on the board, Dr. Wernicke, who all this time we presumably thought was dead, of old age, of a cardiac arrest, as was written on one of the documents we picked up along the way. But there was always hints to him maybe not being dead, because I remember one of the variants who, near the sewers, he was saying something like, how can a dead doctor perform experiments on the living? And again, as I've said before, I thought maybe that was his legacy carrying on, or maybe it was something else. And in the movie theater, the guy who was hiding in the lockers, he also said, you have to find Wernicke to stop this. So it was, I think it was starting to get hinted more and more. Not blatantly said, like, he's alive, but getting hinted that he may not be as dead as we think. And lo and behold, he was there, in a chair, kind of like I said in the last episode, he looked kind of like a mix between Charles Xavier and Stephen Hawking. Probably Charles Xavier just because of the wheelchair business, but like he had this, it looked kind of like an advanced looking wheelchair. I believe it was kind of similar to a wheelchair that Stephen Hawking had, I think, because it looked like he couldn't speak. His mouth was kind of droopy, so maybe the voice was coming from some kind of technology. And he told us, this is the big kicker, that he is older than Sin because Billy does not let him die. I'm not sure what that meant. Billy doesn't let him die. And we'll see Billy in a second of what he had become. But I thought, did he mean that, like, this Billy is keeping him alive, as in he's not letting him out of Mount Massive Asylum, and Wernicke has all these, like, hookups on his chair, like some kind of life support, so maybe he's, like, physically being forced here? Or is it something more, what's the word, supernatural or spiritual, that Billy somehow has a grip on Wernicke's life and is not letting him die in that aspect? But either way, he was not letting him die for some reason, which wasn't all too clear, but that's what it is. He then talked about, in the room he was in, he was talking about, if you look under the Outlast title, there's a logo, a sign, and it was of a nanohazard, or nanomachines, which I'm sure a lot of us know what nanomachines are, whether that's from Science Today or even video games, like, I think it was Metal Gear Rising, where that fella, there's that meme of that fella saying, nanomachines, son. But nanomachines, we know what they are. But if you don't, they're like essentially microscopic, very, 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 very tiny technology that I guess can have a lot of applications. I'm not too well versed about it, but apparently these nanomachines, this nanohazard, it wasn't a viable technology. It couldn't be properly used until Murkoff found a way to use it for, and this is what was about to be explained in a second. So Wernicke described it as using cells to be nanofactories. So the cells of a human body, they was trying through engineering and guiding and science, they was trying to get the cells of a human body to be nanofactories, as in the cells creating the nanocells. Normal human cells creating nanocells, creating these tiny technological things. I don't know if that's the best word to call it, but... And they were using patients from the Mount Massive Asylum as test subjects. So this whole Mount Massive Asylum charity rubbish that Murkoff was trying to blow off was not true. It was just a front to use these poor patients as test subjects for this Project Wallrider business. They was using these test subjects to make use of their cells to create nanomachines. And it was even said by a patient towards the start of the game here. He was saying something like, when he was talking about Walker hunting them down, he was saying, we didn't want any of this, we're just patients, we can't help that we're sick. So the patients didn't know nothing about it. They probably thought that they're just patients, maybe they can get some help in Mount Massive Asylum. But really, they didn't know that the help that they thought they was going to get was really a place where they would be forced to be experimented on and used for profit. Because this is all essentially what I'm saying is kind of a recap of what Wernicke told us in the flesh, but he was saying that Murkoff didn't really care for a couple of patients or doctors, you know, collateral damage as they would probably call it, because they were more interested in the profits that could arise from this Project Wallrider, from this using men to create nanomachines, to be nanofactories. And it was collateral. It didn't matter, because I assumed that, as with any kind of money-hungry, power-hungry corporations like this, they would just use Project Wallrider. If they could replicate these nanomachines and control them, they would probably use them to sell them off as weapons, to maybe, sounds a bit cliche, but to dominate the world, or to dominate places by places. Because if you have a swarm of nanomachines that you can barely see, and it has the powers of a god or a monster, there's not much you can do against that unless you know what you're up against. And against this Wallrider, or now known as Swarm, Nanomachine Swarm, how could you know how to defeat it when it's killed you in 1 second? Like, see how it destroyed Walker within a matter of seconds, like it was nothing. So how and SWAT teams with guns and whatnot, not even that affected it. It just treated them like they were just prey, throwing them around and absolutely destroying them and killing them. So that was that. That was agreed. That was the plot of what they wanted the Wallrider to be. And so Wernicke told us to kill Billy, which was, I guess, the host of this Wallrider thing. But he did warn that, I don't know if he called the morphogenic engine or the Wallrider. I guess they could be intertwined. But he called it self-perpetuating, which I believe it means that it can just keep on recreating itself. Like, I guess once it finds a host, it doesn't need anything else. It can just keep itself alive. And he explained that Wallrider was just a name that people gave to this thing because they didn't understand the science of it. They literally thought it was a god, a spectre, a demon, a spirit, something supernatural, when really it was just science. And so Wernicke let that rumor spread and didn't say anything about it. Maybe because when something is told as godly or out of the boundaries of physics and logic, it makes it that much more scary, because then you start thinking it's invincible, it is divine, there's nothing you can do about it. Whereas if you say, oh, it's a scientific creation, then people may be a bit more calmer and think that, okay, well, if it's a scientific creation, then maybe there are scientific methods to counter it. But I'm not sure why Wernicke let that rumor spread that it was Walrider and not a nanomachine swarm. Maybe because of that reason, maybe because he's like, ah, screw it, just let it happen. So we found Billy, and sorry it's a bit crossed out because I guess we know what happened to Billy in the end, but 23-year-old dude looks like he had been through 7 eternities of hell in this ball chamber thing with tubes inside his sternum, in his nose, mouth, arms, abdominals, obliques, or all the body parts, tubes everywhere inside of him. And our mission was to cut off his life support, cut off the power to the engine, and ultimately shut him down. And while we was doing that, we was chased by this Walrider. I don't know if I want to call it the Swarm or Walrider. I feel like Walrider sounds like it's a name that sticks, but it got me thinking that, because again, I may have missed a detail or two, but is the Walrider controlled by Billy, or was Billy just a host for the Walrider to live, and the Walrider was its own thing? Now, Wernicke said that the Walrider was self-perpetuating, and I'm not sure if that includes creating its own, like, AI, like creating its own artificial intelligence AI. Because Billy may be messed up with all the meds and chemicals they put into him to control him or try to control him, but I don't think he would run around trying or killing all these variants, trying to kill Miles, trying to... I don't know. That's what I'm a bit unsure about, but for now, I feel like Billy is just a host, like a seed, and the Walrider is what grows out of it, its own thing. It's sentience. It gains sentience, essentially. So we got chased by the Walrider through all of this, but managed to turn off this, turn off that, sabotage this, break this, and right in front of the morphogenic engine, we turned it off. Billy, crossed out, died. The fluid inside his little ball chamber turned red. Not sure if that was his own blood coming out or all of the crap that was being pumped into him just being disconnected and filling up. Billy died. William Hope, Billy, he died. But as soon as we killed Billy, the Walrider did a number on Miles, picked him up, like Walker, picked him up, threw him around, just beat the shit out of him. And then something weird happened where it got sucked into his sternum, his stomach, body, chest, and I was thinking about that for a second, but then when I recorded Billy with the camcorder, Miles made a note that Billy is dead, and with that, the Walrider or the Swarm undone. So I thought, oh, okay, but he just went into you. But I'm gonna just trust that Miles knows what he's talking about. The Walrider was undone. And while getting out, Wernicke appears with a SWAT team who kicks the door open. And there's a moment of tension. And then one of the SWAT members shoots a bullet in Miles, and then all you hear is boom, 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 bullets. Miles falls to the ground. It fades to black, and then Wernicke says, Gott in Himmel, you have become the host, which means God in, again, I think Himmel is heaven, or hell. I think, why would it be God in hell? I'm gonna say God in heaven. Correct me, any German-speaking juniors out there, if that's what it means, but we'll go with God in heaven, you have become the host. Which ties back to the self-perpetuating thing, because now it didn't need Billy, this dude tied up in next to the morphogenic engine. in a chamber hooked up with tubes. It didn't need that. It didn't need the morphogenic engine because apparently we destroyed it. It just went into Miles like a spirit does. These nanomachines did something like a spirit does, like possessing someone. It went into Miles. And after Vernica said that, all you heard was the sound of the Wall Rider, which is like the you know, like the whispering, breathy sound. And you heard, well, you heard murder. You heard guns trying to go off, people screaming, death gurgles, death screams. Interestingly enough, I'd never heard Vernica's death scream, but I didn't hear anything specific to him. That's why I've also left Vernica uncrossed, because we didn't see what happened. Maybe... Okay, so here's the thing. Billy didn't want Vernica to die, so maybe Billy has some kind of control on the Wall Rider to not kill Vernica. But this is Miles we're talking about now, because Billy's dead, Miles is the host. Miles doesn't have that connection. He may have a moral compass, as in don't kill these people, but obviously the Wall Rider did. So the Wall Rider might be more powerful than Miles. It might be 50% Miles, 50% Wall Rider. It might be 75% Wall Rider, 25% Miles. It could be 95% Wall Rider, 5% Miles. I don't know. But we didn't actually see Dr. Vernica die, so assumedly he did, because the Wall Rider's a crazy freaking nanomachine spirit that just destroys everything in its path. But there could be a chance that Vernica survived, because, as you know, if something is shown off screen, there is a chance that it may not happen, so, or it may not have happened, so it's not for sure, but it would be a reasonable conclusion that Dr. Vernica died. But I'm just going to keep it open, just in case, just because I like to speculate. So that was that. And now, apparently what is the Wall Rider with Miles as its host, I'm not sure if that means that it's going to stay in Mount Massive Asylum, or is it just going to go out into the world and wreak havoc? I'm not sure what... I'm not too sure what the morphogenic engine was as well. I know it connected Billy and pumped a bunch of crap into him, and maybe got him into the state of that lucid dreaming, that dreaming to then enable or try to control the Wall Rider. But maybe that's the only way that you could potentially control the Wall Rider, was in this dreaming state, which Billy was hooked up in perpetually. But now there is no dreaming state. Miles might be kind of alive with the Wall Rider, but who's to stop them now? Which is... answers need to be found on that. So that is essentially the end of that recap. It was a bit of a... oh bloody hell, it was a bit of a long one, but I feel like it was important to explain, because there's a lot of talking points on it, as in what truly is the definition of the morphogenic engine? What role did Billy exactly have? And now that he's dead, how does that affect how the Wall Rider acts? And what is the Wall Rider? We know it's nanomachines, but is it AI? It says it's self-perpetuating. That word comes up again and again. Perpetuating means like something lasting again and again and again until time ending, or until time unknown. So does that mean it can just keep itself alive on a physical level, or does that mean that it can eventually evolve like a human does into having thought patterns, especially with a host, because could it use the host's thought patterns to come to conclusions and derive logic and action from that? So, at the end, with all this happening, so many people died. The two men are still alive. A lot of variants are presumably still alive. Vernica, probably dead. There is a single-digit % chance that he's alive, but I don't know. The Wall Rider is connected to Miles now, as Miles is the host. I've put a question mark next to Miles because, again, not sure if Miles is dead and the Wall Rider's taken over, or if there's still some conscience of Miles. Same with the Wall Rider. Who knows what the balance of conscience and decision making is. Morphogenic engine, I'd put a question mark next to that because we saw it sparking, but there was no like fire, no big boom explosion. It could be in an irreparable state. It could be fixed again. No idea. And Murkoff Corporation, this entire thing happened, but at the end of the day, the big bosses in the head office are still there. This event of Mount Massive Asylum may have ended, but that has not stopped the enemies at large, which are Murkoff. It would be kind of cool if you could control Swarm Miles or Wall Rider Miles and just wreak havoc on Murkoff, destroying everyone, but as far as I researched in the Whistleblower DLC, which we'll get to in a second, in Outlast 2 and Outlast Trials, I believe it's nothing to do with that. They're all separate stories. So, and that is essentially the end of that. The detective, this investigation board does look a bit empty, but I kind of like it because the information you get is the information that's important. There is no fluff around it. The documents you get, some of it's a bit fluff, but a lot of it does explain about the patients, about the morphogenic engine, about what's going on. But essentially, that is the Outlast case closed. It was a really enjoyable experience. Like, I can't compare it to the previous video game case we did, which was Dead Space, because they are two completely different things. Yes, they are horror games, yes, they are survival horror games, but Dead Space gave you the chance of fighting back with weapons and powers. Outlast was a pure horror game in the fact that you are a powerless human being against genetically modified or physically modified, or both, variants, we'll keep to calling them. And even the game itself says your only options are to run, hide, or die, so it does give you that feeling of helplessness, which amplifies the horror aspect of it, because if there's scary things like in Dead Space, but you're like, yeah, I got a plasma cutter, I got a flamethrower, I've got a beam cannon, I can kill these things, it's still scary, but it gets rid of the horror a bit because you can fight back. But if you're powerless against something and all you can do is rely on your basic human instincts to fight or flight, and in this case flight because you can't fight, it becomes that much more scarier. So it was awesome, and it was no wonder because this game was really well received when it came out, like in terms of the concept, and just it was a scary experience. But that was almost 10 years ago, or it will be in September, I think. 10 years since Outlast was made. I think it would be a good idea for on Monday, because what I'm going to do is, like the end of Dead Space transitioning to Outlast, I think it would be a good idea to transition from Outlast to the DLC, this Whistleblower DLC, which is, I believe it's the story. I'll make a proper case file for it when we actually get to it, but just given the short of it, I believe it was the story of the whistleblower at the start, as put in the investigation board. The whistleblower at the start of the game who contacted Miles to investigate into this, to reveal the truth. So I think we're playing from that character's perspective. So I believe it would make full total sense to do this Whistleblower DLC as our next case for investigation, our next video game case for investigation. I was thinking to merge whatever happens in this Whistleblower DLC into this board, but it may end up being a bit too cluttered, and some aspects of this investigation board may not even tie into the Whistleblower DLC. It should, because technically it's a prequel, but we'll see just how in-depth or detailed it is, because technically if we're going back in time, people like Father Martin, Traeger, Walker may be there, but they may not be dead. So I think it would be worth perhaps starting a new investigation board for that DLC, but we'll see to it when the time comes, because for the weekend coming now, next couple of days, I'm just like last time, I'm going to be releasing the shorts, the YouTube shorts, the clips of anything that I deem worthy, and release it in the meantime, and then on Monday we'll start the Whistleblower DLC, because it should give us more insight into this whole situation, how it all went to shit, maybe more detail about Billy, about the morphogenic engine, about Vernica. I wonder if they know that. I wonder if Vernica is alive in the DLC, or if they think he's dead then too. But surely he should be alive, because this was in the underground labs, and maybe everyone knew about it. It was just the outside world that didn't know. But we could go in a rabbit hole speculating. I think it would be better to start truly closing this Outlast case now. So that's going to be the end of that. Next couple of days, shorts and clips will be released, and then on Monday we'll start the Whistleblower DLC and see where all this potentially begun. But yeah, that is that sorted. Case closed. And as I've got to say, as I always do say, because I don't like laying it on too thick, but obviously if you liked the videos this entire journey, then like the videos, because doing such a simple action does help a lot in the long run. It builds up progress, it builds up momentum, it only does good things. And comment, you never be afraid to comment your thoughts, whether it's no spoilers, try to avoid the spoilers, because I do like reading every comment, but if it's a spoiler, it kind of, well, it spoils it. But if it's just a theory that may or may not happen, like you genuinely speculating of what could or could not happen, piecing any evidences together, do that. Discussing a certain topic of what happened in the case, do that. Giving your opinions, do that, But it's all a discussion forum. It's you're all junior detectives here. By the way, if you're not, subscribe to become a junior detective of the agency. But we're all teammates here, and it is interesting just reading, as long as they're not like speculations which are actually spoilers because you know what happened. But reading what your thoughts are, it is interesting to see what theories people come up with. Again, it's a 10-year-old video game, so spoilers are bound to be here and there, but we try our best to, for the people who have not experienced this before, to keep it clean for them, so nothing's ruined, it's enjoyable for everyone. But that will be pretty much the end of this case investigation, and we will leave it there and pick up that new Whistleblower DLC case on Monday. But until then, take care, and I will see you then.